Today we are going to talk about the social role theory on gender. We are group 1. And these are our group members. There's me, Jenteng. There's Jeremy, Matthew Sean Daniel, Alicia, Martin, and Wising. So what does it mean? What does social role theory mean? Social role theory is a social psychology theory that pertains to sex difference and similarities in social behavior. Its key principle is that differences and similarity and arise primarily from the distribution of men and women into social roles within the society. Through socialization and the formation of gender roles, the behaviors of men and women generally support and sustain the division of labor. In industrialized economies, for example, social roles are organized so that women are more likely than men to be homemakers and primary caretakers of children and to hold caretaking jobs in the paid economy. In contrast, men are more likely than women to be primary family providers and to assume full-time roles in the paid economy, often ones that involve assertiveness, physical strength, or leadership skills.
So we have asked a poll on social media asking if it's okay for guys to wear makeup, and according to the results, majority of them agreed, with only a few of them disagreeing to this idea. Aside from that, we have also asked. We've also received answers from interviews that we have done, and here's what they have to say about it. Okay, hello Omar. Thank you for taking this time to let me ask you some questions. So, without further ado, shall we get started on it?
Sure.
So, to get started with, okay, how would you feel if, let's say, guys start wearing makeup, right? Would you feel? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, you're fine with it. With okay. But okay, how about, let's say, in your circle of friends, you have a person that is a part of the LGBTQ community. How would you feel about that?
Oh, I actually have a friend who's gay.
Oh,
Two
okay.
friends, so I'm pretty comfortable with it. So
Okay.
I don't have any thing
Okay.
I can say about them. They're pretty cool, actually.
Ah, that's good to know. All right. Um, okay, in terms of gender bias in your immediate area, right? How would you how would you rate the level of the gender bias in your area, and would you say that there is a gender bias?
Yeah, there is.
Oh,
My dad actually thinks I'm gay because I'm feminine color, so he wants me to act like a guy for once. Do this kind of stuff after with work so that I can act like a guy and not some, you know, person who like feminine
Nice.
feminine colors. Yeah, so the gender bias in my environment, I can say is pretty high when it comes to acting like a what a guy should be.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's understood. Okay. Last question. Let if you have a partner, would you be comfortable with your partner becoming the alpha in the relationship?
I have no. What do you mean?
Like, let's say
Okay. Oh,
they are the ones leading rather than
oh,
you. You know.
I mean, it doesn't matter both ways. The person can be the leader in some parts, or I could be the one leading it. Let's say that person is weak on this spot, I can help that person, and if I'm weak on this spot, that person can help me. So instead of having a single person leading the pack, there will be a person leading in this part of where I'm weak, and I will help that person if he's weak on that, or she is weak on that part. You get what I mean?
I understand. Okay.
There's
Well.
no out or something or leaders or something. It's
Ah.
just us helping together, helping each other kind of thing.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you for taking this time to answer them, and have a nice
Gotcha.
day.
You too.
All right. So, moving on, we're going to be talking about women in leadership positions. So, as the poll stated here, we've like three polls here. So, one of the polls stated about women in leadership positions. Majority goes with yeah, because well, in our country we have gender equality, but in some areas where we know as gender bias. Many areas have gender bias in their times, you know. So in our country, the majority don't believe in that. And yeah, secondly, we go to, would you be comfortable if your male friend was more into feminine clothing? Or would you be comfortable if your female friend was more into masculine clothing? So both of that, well, some of them for the male friend thingy, some of them actually agreed with it, some of them didn't agree with it. Well, most of us have open-minded about this being gay, being bisexual in that manner, being lesbian, or in that society. Some of us are not in that acceptance as well. So yeah, these are the records. All right, guys. Welcome to my interview today. Good afternoon, and right now we have Sean and Darshan with us. So today we're going to be talking about the social role theory of gender. So I'm going to be asking you all a few questions. So first up, what do you guys think about women in leadership positions? Sean, you first.
My personal thoughts, it's just the right decision to make in the leadership position. So female or male, until they can make the right decision and towards the right choice, I'm good with that. And that's the reasonable way for me to like decide who should be in the leadership position. It's about the capabilities of the person.
All right. So you think that gender equality is there? You don't mind you see the work, you don't see the you see the completed work, right? So you don't see the gender bias and so on and so forth, right? All right. So that's a good opinion from you. What about you, Darshan?
Yeah, I totally agree with Sean. I think both of them actually have very good potential. It's just all about their ability and also their skill on how they develop the leadership quality in them. So there's no such thing. Only guys can be a leader. Even women can be a leader. I mean, let's take an example as our mom, right? We can see how our mom really, So yeah, simple as that. As long as you have the potential, both of them can be a leader.
All right. Very great, strong points from both of you. And it's very decent to say that we as human beings, we see us as normal people. We don't see gender. We don't have biases in our areas. So I would like to say that it's very positive thinking. And so that's about it, guys. Thank you for this interview, and I'll see you all in a bit.
Hello, Ezra, Adam, and Rohan. Thank you guys for letting me interview you today. I'm going to ask you guys. Okay, for the first question, as more and more women are becoming more independent today, what are your thoughts on the change in gender roles recently, or what are your thoughts on traditional gender roles, like the more modernized gender roles these days, or the change in equality? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's getting better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you
Okay, I
elaborate?
So women and men, I don't think are that different. I think when they're compared, they have it's like a 5% difference in their traits. But if you take it to the extremes of the spectrum, like let's say men will be more physically dominant, or if you look at the opposite side of the spectrum, women will be more compassionate. Like they'll be in like the 100%, the top like 1% of that. So those are the big differences, and that's why I think gender roles will always exist.
The difference is all biological. They're not like psychological, right? So
yeah, nature.
A lot.
Choice.
Some I guess it makes sense, but a lot of them are very old-fashioned, and they're not. The gender role that applies back then don't necessarily apply logically if you think about it. Like women back then, women couldn't drive. Like, how does that make sense? Right? You're operating the same thing, and it's not that hard to operate.
Yeah, so people say that there are barely any women CEOs compared to men CEOs, and that could be seen as discrimination, but I think it comes under a lot of factors actually, because if you look at traits that men mostly have, it's like they're affirmative and they're confrontational, and that's like they have more confrontational and like more affirmative than women on average. That's like been tested, right? So those are traits that a CEO would have or a business company leader would have. So that's why they're more in that role. And I think we should stop seeing that as discrimination, and more so that's just where those people decide to go. Like maybe women just prefer to do jobs that go into other fields. Like maybe they prefer medical fields, right? Because there's more women nurses than there are men nurses. And I guess some jobs will always be predominantly one gender because they just prefer that on average, and that shouldn't be a problem. Like, who cares if there's more men CEOs? You know, it's not like they're gonna run the company any differently.
True.
I think.
I mean. Oh wait, no, you can't say. Go ahead.
I think probably a lot of gender roles are taught instead of like you're born, like the idea that like, I'm gonna sound sexist, but if you think of someone who's like, if you ask someone who's better at like cooking, cleaning, and stuff like that, people will just say women. But like, why is that? That's because of like things that are taught. It's not like biologically. It's not like the bone structure of women is made to handle a mop or a pot better than a man.
True.
Yeah, that's the point I was making just now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now that we learn that it's not necessarily different, we can always just educate the next generation rather than like discriminate, rather than trying to scope the current generation. You can probably educate the next generation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I mean,
pretty good.
I guess, like, if you put no limitations, like in Scandinavia, they're extremely open-minded. They say, okay, there is no such thing as gender roles, do whatever you want. But there's this Scandinavian gender paradox where they give it complete openness, but yet women still went into more compassionate fields of work, like medicine or caretaking, and men still did STEM fields more. So it could be seen as, like, it's their nature.
It also
not
depends
nurture.
on your personality. It just depends on your interests a lot.
I guess a lot of factors go into it, and it's not only discrimination that pushes women or men into certain fields. So maybe we shouldn't categorize it as as a bad thing to have gender roles. Yeah.
Not necessarily bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then, like, speaking of, I mean, if you guys have spoken about like differences back then, it didn't really make sense to you. Then what about like things such as like the pay gap and stuff like that? Some people actually don't believe that the pay gap exists. So what are your opinions on it?
I mean, I don't really research on it, but if it exists, there's going to be data of it.
Yeah. Like what Adam says, right? It's been researched before, and yes, discrimination does come into play, but it is a number of factors, like a plethora of different factors that come into the gender pay gap. Like just natural gravitation towards certain jobs. Like, let's say, I'm gonna use the example again that women normally go towards more caregiving, more nurturing kind of roles.
Wait, that's not really gender pay gap. Gender pay gap is
by the way, listen.
An office,
like
an office, a man and a woman works at the same department, let's say, same positions, but the man gets paid higher even though the woman does the same.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to debate, because then you have to look at years of work, you have to look at experience and all of that, like work ethic. It really comes under a lot of things. Discrimination does probably come into play, especially in countries like that are still oppressed women, like maybe like Arab countries or something like that, where women can barely even work.
100%.
Right? But in more open-minded countries or liberal countries like America or England, I don't believe that is so prevalent. Because
gender discrimination?
Not gender discrimination. I mean pay gap being discrimination being the sole reason for the gender pay gap.
Yeah, but the thing is, gender pay gap always gets like, how do I say this? Wait, what's the word for it? God damn it, crap. It's been shunned as like something bigger than it is, because when it rarely happens, and when one company turns out to have this gender pay gap, that company suddenly becomes infamous for it, and then that gives an illusion that the gender pay gap is a bigger thing than it is in this modern day.
Yeah, also, I'd like to say that when people compare the gender pay gap, they look at averages, and that is like an extremely twisted way of looking at it because that doesn't really make sense, right? Let's say that
Yeah.
more men are in the
It
STEM
should
field.
be company by company, not
Yeah, let's say more men are in STEM fields which pay more, and more women are in. Okay, this is extremely generalizing. I don't think this at all. Let's say like women are in nursing are more in lower paid jobs. So how can you compare those two and then say that's a pay gap? They're different jobs, and then there's more men working than women working.
wait. But I thought gender pay gap you compare between the same job, not different.
I mean, I guess
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
look at the averages, or you can look at the more focused one. But the more focused one is obviously probably more towards discrimination. But on average, I think it's just because gender roles, really.
I think when people say that the pay gap doesn't really exist, I think I've seen stories from back then where women had the same job as men. They had the same like role in a company and everything, but the men still got paid higher than the woman.
Yeah,
but I
but
think when
that,
people say like, wait, no, go ahead and say.
yeah, that's the thing. Back then, now
Yeah.
it's rarer, which is better.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
just rare.
think-
Yeah, I was gonna say like people think it doesn't exist these days because
I think
it's not
now,
as prevalent.
Yeah, it's not
like
as
in
prevalent.
some areas of work, there's still like big pay gaps, but like in Hollywood, like the amount of money a top actor makes compared to like a top female actress is like really big. Also, like if you go to like higher paying jobs where like your work isn't per hour, it's like a fixed salary, and it's based more, like Ezra said, on like experience and stuff. I mean, it's like your boss who's determining that, and your boss probably has like some internal misogyny, and he probably thinks that the man will, or like possibly their boss could have internalized misogyny and will perceive the man deserving more pay, and will pay a man more.
Yeah, I mean, when you go look at it case by case, it's highly anecdotal. I'm sure if you look deeper into it, there's so many things that go into it other than discrimination.
You
But
can't
that
really
definitely comes into
generalize
play.
this.
Yeah, I mean, we're still trying to progress, and I think the world still has a lot of problems concerning discrimination, especially towards women or
Yeah,
minorities.
like think about it. A lot of the progress we've had between like gender equality all has happened in the last 10, 20 years. It's pretty short period of time. So like you can't expect immediate change. There's like make sure that at least it gets better, not worse.
Okay, true. Okay, well, with that mindset, do you think that like the older generation, right? Do you think that their mindset can change? Because a lot of, as you guys said, like a lot of our mindsets were built in thanks to previous generations, like such as traditional roles, what we should do, what we should do. Like, for example, I've noticed in like Asian countries in particular, a lot of the girls in their families, they're forced to like take care of everything else as like the man sits around. Do you think like that? Do you think like the previous generation? Do you think their mindset can change in
It'll be
this time
hard.
and age?
It's like you can't teach old dogs new tricks, right? That's been implemented to them so hard, indoctrinated to believe that women are lesser than men, and that's extremely toxic.
Yeah,
And
but
it's really hard to change that because
I think they would
it's really
die
hard to change that, but that
before
doesn't
they
mean
change their
we
mind.
should. Yeah. No, even if we can't change their mind, doesn't mean we should like give up.
yeah. I mean, I guess the only way to do that is by showing them examples of how women can be empowered and showing them in power so that they can see like, okay, the world isn't what I thought it looked like before. It actually is this progressive new place where, women can do essentially anything a man can do.
Yeah, the world changes, but let's be honest, we all hate change. We just don't realize it.
Okay,
True.
that's an opinion.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for joining this interview. I hope you guys have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
So I'm Alicia, and I'll be explaining on terms like gender perception on terms of gender bias in social and work in society. So apparently, based on this survey, right, The result is tied as even, but in terms of gender-wise, majority women rated below 5 as to gender bias in their immediate environment, while the men's rated 5 and above. This shows that women are more likely to not be easily affected in an environment where a gender bias situation is happening, while men are cautiously aware of it.
Okay, moving on, as we can see, we have 2 questions, each with a unique style of asking. The first question would be, have you drawn professional inspiration from other women? The majority of people responded yes. I too was inspired by other women as well, such as J.K. Rowling, the author who wrote Harry Potter. To continue, the second question we asked was, tell us about someone who has inspired you. The comments or answer we received are different, as some were inspired by previous jobs, some were wise words, and the finest comments that I've seen is mothers.
So in conclusion, according to all the information that we found and that you've seen, a large portion of people these days are more open towards things such as women being a part of leadership roles and men wearing feminine clothing. And though there's still a portion of people out there who aren't so open about stuff like this, there's still a majority of people, according to our research, that are quite accepting towards this. Yes, thank you.